Let me take that to the other panelists here, because I think speaking of regional order is very important, since we're speaking about global governance, and this is regional governance. The question whether the region is able to set rules and also to implement rules together, whether that be on the economic front, the political front, or the security front. And I would like to ask you, Prince Turki, since Saudi Arabia, beyond the reach of its own country, has been trying to manage succession, may we say, or transformation in Yemen, but it has also been very active, together with other Gulf countries, on having a very clear and tough stance of the Arab League on Syria. And Syria is probably more important to us in Europe, in the West, than Yemen is. Maybe it shouldn't, but fact is that we care more for it, and what happens there seems to be particularly dreadful. What can the Arab world, what can Arab states, and what can outsiders do, and what should they do about Syria?
Let me just start by referring to your introduction about me. You mentioned that I was ambassador in the US and the UK. You did not mention that I proudly served my country as well in Ireland. I just thought I would rectify that mistake. We talked about internal developments, and I mentioned what Saudi Arabia faced in the several challenges of development inside the kingdom, whether it is people's representation in government, whether it is poverty eradication, eradication of illiteracy, etc., economic and political and social reform, as I said, is an imperative in the kingdom and not a choice. Around us, however, the world is not sitting back and letting us simply turn to our internal developments. I agree with Amr Moussa and Ed Jerigian. Palestine occupies a large part of our concerns. And I've been saying over the years that if you dissect an Arab or a Muslim's body to its smallest composition of the smallest cell in its body, you will find the word Palestine engraved in there. And I think that's how much it has in terms of effect on the psyche and the conduct of Arabs and Muslims in general. So finding a solution for that, of course, will go a long way of removing the feeling of injustice and resentment and other such issues from the minds of not only Arabs but Muslims in general. Our neighbors are equally active, whether it is Iran or Turkey. Our foreign minister expressed very eloquently, I think, the difference that between the activities of both. He described our Turkish neighbors' contribution to the Arab world as coming in a very transparent and friendly manner, and in a manner that seeks the betterment of the peoples of the Arab world, whereas the approach of our Iranian neighbors has been to encourage either revolution or plotting or other such negative activities. And we have to take those into consideration as not just as the kingdom, but as the Arab world. And when you talk about Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states' approach to Yemen, for example, it's been one of trying to find accommodation and a release for the tension and the fighting that is going there through a very prescribed and very definitive program of action that starts with the removal of the president and then the succession of the vice president, a new government composed of opposition and government parties, etc., with a timetable for elections and so on. In Syria, the kingdom and the Gulf states, of course, were in the forefront of countries that called for Arab League action against the present situation in Syria. King Abdullah described what is happening there as a killing machine, and that has to stop. In Libya as well, as Mr. Amr Moussa mentioned, the Arab League, when it took the decision to go to the Security Council, the GCC countries were also in the forefront of the countries calling for that. All of that, however, does not absolve us from not trying to, if you like, describe or ascribe to Syria a means of getting out of its present situation. The killing has to stop. But how do you do that? You have a president, I don't know if you saw his interview in the last couple of days on American television, who simply denies that there is anything wrong happening there. And his responsibility, he described it as, has nothing to do with what the killing, et cetera, et cetera. So such a kind of leadership for people that are being killed on the streets is unacceptable. And inevitably, the change will come to that leadership. But will it be a change with more bloodshed, or hopefully with less bloodshed? Fortunately, I don't have in my pocket a formula for that, but I think this is where the Arab League is heading. It's not going to sit back and allow the continued massacre of the Syrian people. Sanctions have been imposed. I think more measures will be undertaken in the near future. I'm not privy to what those measures are, but I can imagine several scenarios where the Arab League can go. And there is a growing consensus in the world community, even among countries that have expressed in the past reservations about widening, if you like, the circle of responsibility on Syria, like Russia and China. I think as the killing continues, they will definitely come along with the rest of us and see that the leadership in Syria has to give up, and hopefully in a less bloody way than is now being contemplated. And other such situations. And I am really convinced, as Amr Moussa said, that the change on the activity of the Arab League is no longer one that is going to be forestalled or put back or pushed back by any consequences in the Arab world. It has taken very bold and courageous decisions based on human rights values. And I think that's an important qualitative edge to these political and brave decisions that the Arab League has taken. So all other Arab countries must beware if they don't conduct themselves in the way that they should towards their people. The Arab League will be there to come in and hopefully help the people overcome whatever oppression they may be suffering. So all of these things are taking place in our community, and having, as others have mentioned, help from Europe or from the United States. Frankly, I think Europe and the United States need to put their houses in order before they can come and say, let us help you. And as such, we can, it's not that we don't need support from others, but it's going to sound disingenuous for countries that can't even make a decision on how to rescue their own members, and on whether it is financial or otherwise, to come and offer us to rescue us. So that's another point I think that Europe and the Arab world will have to engage in discussion about how we can go forward and complement each other. And I think Europe's own issues with Islamophobia, as President Gül mentioned, and considerations on immigration, that is something for Europeans to overcome. But it reflects on us, and it reflects on the individual Arab or neighbor of Europe who looks upon these matters becoming mainstream in European politics rather than exceptions. These are things that have to be fixed for the immediate neighbors of the Arab world to become helpful.
Thank you very much.